But I'm going to start off with a true story. 3-year-old birthday girl was sitting morosely by the wall, watching the other children shouting, shoving candy down their throats, and kicking balloons around the living room. The birthday girl's mother grabbed her by the shoulders, bulldozed her out of her seat, and pushed her around the room like a shopping trolley. "Happy, happy, happy," the mother kept shouting. "Kick, kick the ball," she shouted with annoyingly enthusiastic voice, until finally the little girl reluctantly tapped a balloon with her toe. Then the mother let go of the girl, put her hands together, and said, "Happy, happy, happy." What's the matter with this child? She lives in a 758.5 square foot apartment in a good part of town. Her latest IQ tests show her having a score of 178, 3 points higher than the brat next door. She's near the top of her class in the second best kindergarten in the district. All those Junior Einstein DVDs, all those little Mozart recordings, the saxophone lessons, the tennis training. Doesn't she realize she's happy? Stupid girl. Is this little girl depressed? Of course not. Any parent would recognize the problem. She just hasn't learned statistics yet. We modern urban humans live by the numbers, from birth to death. Every stage of life, every milestone, every single person's identity has a numerical value attached to it. Parents practically introduce their kids by IQ score. We introduce them by score, not by name. That is, until they get into kindergarten, when they're assigned 2 new rankings. Second in his class in the #1 kindergarten. Of course, a so-called good kindergarten will assure entry into a prestigious primary school where another integer, the grade point average, gets tacked on. And then by the time the kid gets into secondary school, their resume is starting to look like a supermarket cash register receipt. IQ, EQ, school rating, class rank, GPA, A-levels, O-levels. The higher all those numbers are, the better the university they'll get into. And when the university scores come in, the bigger final prize, the salary figure. But the happy numbers don't stop there. Who's cooler, the guy with the iPhone 3 or 4? Her ring is 3 carats. Now that's love. Chinese weddings are ranked by the number of tables. And Western ones are ranked for their price tag. And then people here in Asia will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a lucky number car tag or a lucky telephone number. Even your address can tell you a lot about your identity. So if you live in New York, for example, and you tell someone that you live in the 40s, well, that has one kind of connotation. You double that number, and your prestige value increases 1,000%. But be careful, if you double it again, it can have the opposite effect. I lived in London, and there in London, people judge you by your postcode. And it's amazing how much difference a single digit can make. Here in Hong Kong, the first item on the TV news is usually the stock market report, and the last item is usually the Mark 6 lottery numbers. As if the Dow Jones, the FTSE, the Hang Seng Index, these are the measures of how happy, happy, happy our society is. It's no wonder that the top professions in New York, in London, here in Hong Kong are professions such as banker, stockbroker, accountant, logistics, programming. What do all these have in common? Numbers. But how do you really quantify that as success? Not with salary. I mean, if anyone here has ever not lied about their salary, please raise your hand. Well, 1 or 2. I'm surprised. But here in Asia, we figured it out. The way to judge how successful someone is isn't by their car or their labels on their clothing, but by the number of square feet they live in. So how many times has someone come to my house in Hong Kong, or I've gone to theirs, and the first thing said isn't, "Oh, what a lovely place." What's the first thing you say? "Oh, how many square feet? How much you pay?" So it's all numbers, 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 all day long. Numbers rate our quality of life. Numbers determine our standing in society. Numbers affect our self-image. Numbers tell us whether we're a success or a failure. Are you happy with your life? How do I know unless you can prove it to me with your numbers? Now, if success and happiness is a numerical function, then it makes sense that there should be a numerical formula to express it. So I decided to create one. Now, Einstein, not the junior, but the senior, in a single year came up with the beginnings of quantum theory, statistical physics, his regular and his special theories of relativity, during this year that he called his annus mirabilis. I took even less than a year to come up with formula for success. But who's counting? So let's take a look. If a kid's IQ determines how good a kindergarten he or she's going to get into, we can express it this way, with K being kindergarten and the little g meaning how good it is. But what is X? What is the threshold IQ number that determines how good a kindergarten a kid's going to get into? Now, theoretically, the mean IQ in a population is supposed to be 100. But I've never yet met a parent who boasted about an IQ any less than 180. So, making that our baseline, a child's real score is the difference between his IQ and the baseline. And we still need X. Fortunately, that turns out, in my research, to be a prime number. No, not a mathematical prime number, but I'm talking about the prime rate, which is currently 5%, and which we express here as P. Voila. Now, if your kid has a supposed IQ of 210, he'll enter a third-rate kindergarten. But if you increase the IQ by just 6 points, he may get into a second-rate one, which raises the number one concern, oh, there I go with numbers again, number one concern of upwardly mobile parents, which is how to squeeze every last drop of IQ into Junior's developing brain. If the scholarly articles in the magazines at the supermarket checkout are to be believed, then a few hours a day of playing with various baby genius educational toys and DVDs and listening to Mozart or Beethoven, because remember, only Western classical music enhances brain cells, and sucking on brain boost vitamin formula, all these are guaranteed to supercharge the youthful gray matter. And that this will then ensure that one day your child will grow up to be an overpaid banker or lawyer, or at least marry one. Actually, though, the only thing that these products are guaranteed to do is to cost a lot of money. So in our formula, we'll summarize it all by applying the variable B for budget. Now, the mathematicians among you will notice right away that plus or minus B times 1 over B actually has no effect on the result. But parents want to feel like they're doing something to help their child's development. And so by spending money on all these baby genius items, they're at least helping the economy, which will help ensure that Junior has a job one day when he or she grows up and can afford to buy baby Play-Doh and Junior Genius products for his or her own children. Now, since the status of the developing genius's kindergarten determines which private elementary school they're going to get into, which then leads to which high school they're going to get into, we really don't need to insert a lot of variables. But on the other hand, calculating a longer formula makes us feel more scientific. So we will show that the quality of kindergarten has an equivalency to the quality of the elementary school, E. But actually, it's not that simple, so we have to fix it. Because the quality of the elementary school they get into is a function of how much tutoring he or she is tormented with, which we will call T squared, which is mitigated by the other factor, which is free time, FT, which is a negative factor here. And so for secondary school, all we do is turn up the tutoring a notch. So we have tutoring to the infinite power, and free time always must equal 0. Then, of course, university, that's the next step. Now, there's other factors involved for university. We have to enter in the values of A level versus O level, plus GCSE, SAT, AP, IB, plus the very important variable at the end of the formula. But we're not done yet, because every bit of this is inversely proportional to how much your child is enjoying life. So, the bigger the value for happiness, of course, everything above the line decreases proportionally. Now, wait a minute, though. You see something wrong here. I started talking about happiness. Now, how did it become a negative factor here? That's because in this formula, happiness is a deferred value. According to the parental laws of physics, happiness in the present is an indicator that your kid isn't studying hard enough. Happiness is something they get to experience someday in the future, determined by how much money he or she makes. As my mother put it to me, you'll enjoy yourself after you retire. Which brings us to the meat of the matter. How do we know how much money this kid's going to make? This requires a separate and more complex calculation. It's based on the university's name or location, so we need a special formula which I have expressed in programming language. So we can see that the income that they're going to derive from the university is dependent on the name of the... Oh, I left off one university, didn't I? And of course, there's those unfortunate few who are unable to make the grade, and so we have to add a couple more lines to the formula. Okay, we're almost there. Once we know someone's income, we can figure out how big a property they can afford. So we never mind all the calculations about loan percentages or depreciation or market values. This can all be boiled down into another formula, which I haven't put here because I don't know which mathematical curly cues would be fitting for it. So what we're going to do is insert it into the main formula with the value called ft squared. And here we have it, the formula for success. Lovely, isn't it? Now, as a good scientist, I first had to test the formula on my own children. When my son ended up in art school, waiting tables in a cheap restaurant, I knew that there were some things that still had to be worked out. So I contracted with the greatest programming minds on earth in the under $5 an hour category on elance.com and came up with this iPhone app. So let's apply this to our 3-year-old birthday girl. If she has 2 hours and 25 minutes a day of tutoring and Baby Genius DVDs and Western classical music, we come up with these figures. But if we turn up the tutoring and the Mozart, then we have an increase in those all-important values of IQ and GPA. So then comes the final calculation, the number that we're waiting for. So all we have to do is dot the I, cross the T, do the hokey pokey, shake for 6 minutes, and there we have it. She's going to be a corporate accountant. That little girl will grow up to be a corporate accountant for a Hong Kong office of a South Korean logistics firm, have a 10-table wedding with a mainland Chinese businessman, and own a 937 square foot flat in Meifu Sunchun Estate in East Kowloon. Happy, happy, happy. Thank you very much.